everybody, and welcome to Nathan on Shuffle and to my latest episode of New Music Weekly. It's February 18th, 2023, and this is the show where I give you guys the top 5 prog news headlines for the week, give you guys some top singles to check out in the prog genre, and also give you updates on what's been happening with the channel and what you can expect this following week. So hopefully you'll enjoy this program. If you haven't subscribed yet, I always want to recommend a subscription so you're notified to when these videos come out. I do them typically every Friday or Saturday, depending on my schedule. And it's just a weekly way to keep people up to date with prog news and up to date with my channel, and just to give a more relaxed show to be able to just talk to you guys freely and get your opinions in the comments. So I'm really excited for today's episode. Last week I had to basically cancel the show because of my own schedule and just things were a bit hectic. I did do a bit of a short that talked about basically the headlines I would have talked about, and I'm going to incorporate some of those into this week's episode to talk more in depth about some of these items. So I wanted to make sure to cover some of the big things that are happening. So that might happen from occasion just because of my work schedule. Sometimes I get called in for overtime and stuff, and I can't really juggle doing this show along with some of those responsibilities. So just a little bit behind the curtain of what's going on here. But happy to do the show today, and hopefully you'll be excited for some of these news items and a bit of a catch-up from the week prior. So first item I wanted to mention in my prog headlines list is there's a new release out yesterday called The Final Flight Live at Olympia from Transatlantic. This is their big live album from their last tour, the Absolute Universe tour. I did a review of it, so please check out my review from this past week where I talk about the album. I also did an album rankings style show for Transatlantic, talking about their 5 studio releases and how I would rank them, and been getting a lot of good comments of how other people would rank their albums too. So it's always fascinating to see how different people would rank and order a catalog, because everyone has their own unique perspectives and opinions, and that's what makes it fun and exciting. But yeah, this is a pretty major release in the prog world, because this is very well documenting what could be the very last concert that Transatlantic ever performs. This was in Paris, essentially, and was a big, expansive set list and involving the entirety of their latest album, The Absolute Universe, as well as smatterings from across their catalog, a big giant medley to end the night with all of their big epics condensed into this one big medley piece that really is an exciting conclusion to their set. So really emotional for the band because of the fact that this very well may be their last performance, and this very well may be one of their last items that they release as a band. So very notable, very good document of their prior tour and of just the band in total. They should be releasing also a Morsefest package as well later in the year to document their performance at Morsefest this past year. So it isn't really the end for Transatlantic releases totally, but it feels like a very notable ending in a sense, because this was what the band is talking about as a likely final concert from them, and documenting that and the emotion behind it. So check that one out. And if you haven't checked out Transatlantic, I recommend any and all of their studio albums. They're all incredible and amazing, maybe just starting from their very first one up to the current latest one in Absolute Universe. So that would be great. But yeah, that was the number 1 item on my list of releases. Number 2, I wanted to catch up on the Roger Waters Pink Floyd drama and news. And just so you know, I don't get too into the political aspects of it and all that kind of stuff. That's just not my realm, and I just don't really delve into that in my life anyways. So I don't want to delve into that stuff, but I did want to mention, since Pink Floyd is such a major prog band that I tend to cover on the channel, and this has been really taking off in the news segment, that I thought it was worthy of its own item here. So I'll briefly talk about some of the items that have been occurring over the past few weeks. Basically, one of the first things I saw about this was Roger Waters feuding essentially with David Gilmour and his partner, Pauly Sampson. Pauly Sampson accused Waters of being misogynistic, sick with envy, and anti-Semitic to your rotten core. Some very real insults being hurled towards Roger Waters. I know there's some deep-seated things that are going on with some things that Roger Waters has said that probably has created a lot of this animosity. Roger Waters' response is saying that this is totally incendiary and wildly inaccurate, and he's taking legal advice on how to handle the situation. Gilmour came onto the scene and basically supported his partner in saying that these things she's saying are demonstrably true. So there's obviously some bad blood between the two. Any sort of possibility of a reunion or reuniting is probably absolutely dead at this point, which it probably already was anyways, but this just sticks more nails into that coffin. So it's really an unfortunate spat between these two legendary musicians that really should have more respect for each other because they're both incredible in their own rights. But unfortunately, Roger Waters seems to have a pretty major ego and has been saying some potentially controversial things that have been striking a lot of people the wrong way. And in fact, there was news of Roger Waters addressing the United Nations. Really interesting. He's very anti-war, and obviously there's a lot that he has to say about this war in Ukraine with Russia and all of that stuff. Like I said, I'm not going to get into the specifics of that, but he's basically speaking a lot out against some of the things that are going on there, especially on the Ukrainian side, and people supplying Ukraine with weapons and things that he feels like will just perpetuate more war when there needs to be more of a some sort of peace coming together. But it doesn't really come across very well the way it's being handled, and maybe providing more sympathy to parties that you wouldn't want to express sympathy for, and it doesn't seem like it's being handled in the best way and in the best light from that perspective. And so, but really probably the most interesting piece of all this to me, as the music perspective rather than the political perspective, is Roger Waters has announced he's re-recorded Dark Side of the Moon without his bandmates. He's actually gone on record to say that he wrote Dark Side of the Moon. He said, let's get rid of all this we crap. Of course, we were a band. There were 4 of us. We all contributed, but it's my project and I wrote it. So blah. So just a little bit coming across very badly here, in my opinion, really diminishing the contributions from his bandmates to Dark Side of the Moon, which is obviously a seminal classic that everyone holds in high esteem. And I think it's a combination of factors that makes that such a landmark album, not just purely Roger Waters, although admittedly he was a big part of it and a huge voice in that album and a huge part of the creative, but it feels a little bit icky for him to totally dismiss his bandmates' contributions and just re-record it in his own way and doing his own thing with it. Feels a little bit weird when it was such a collaborative band project. But apparently that's going to come out at some point, his own take on it, his own solo version of Dark Side of the Moon. Hard to imagine that it's going to live up to the heights of the classic, but that's potentially something to look for, I suppose, along with all of this crazy stuff with Roger Waters, which a lot of people, I think, are feeling left cold by it all. And, it's an unfortunate thing when, someone becomes this villainized and goes off the rails to this degree. It just feels a little bit sad, but that's basically my take on it in general about the things that are going on there. I thought I should give a more expanded take since it seems to be a popular point of discussion. But like I said, I don't come to it at all from a political angle. I don't want to give my thoughts about that side of it and where I land in my own beliefs. That's just not what I do on this channel, but wanted to mention it as interesting musical prog news because of the musicians involved. Item number 3, Arjen Lucassen unveils his new Supersonic Revolution project. This is a new group that basically Arjen has put together, which is more of a throwback 70s glam rock style band, very heavily inspired by the music of the 1970s, some of the early proto-metal type stuff. I feel like there's some Deep Purple, Rainbow, that type of influence baked into this. There's a single that's out that I'm going to put in the singles list as well, called The Glam Attack, to give you a sense of what the album's all about. Once again, really leaning heavily into this glam rock sort of phase in the 70s. The album is called Golden Age of Music, and it's coming out on May 19th through Music Theory Recordings and Mascot Records. It's out for pre-order. Various different vinyl variants are out there, different marbled, purple marbled, pink marbled, blue vinyl. All of that stuff is out and available along with some other CDs and digipack type stuff. So that should be good. Also, I saw that 01, his album that came out with Arion, that he's actually doing a live performance of, also was put out on vinyl, reissued, I assume, on vinyl as well. So that's another thing that can be picked up along with this new Supersonic Revolution album. So some cool stuff in the Arjen Lucassen camp. I'm excited. I'm a big fan of Arjen and his work, so I wanted to mention that here. The band that he put together involves his longtime keyboard player Joost van der Broek. Guitarist Timo Somers is here, drummer Cohen Herfst, and singer John J.C. Kuipers. People that he's used on his recent albums in some regards. So that should be a really interesting project to check out, especially if you like that early 70s glam rock style. There's definitely all kinds of references and things to that in the lyrics and in the project itself. Number 4, Jay Shellen joins Yes as a permanent member. Unfortunately, Alan White passed away in 2022. And Jay has basically been filling in for him in a more temporary capacity, but it sounds like they've made it official that he's actually a permanent member, and the band seems thrilled to have him join the fold. Steve Howe says, "We're all delighted to welcome Jay officially into the fold. He's been a great support throughout the last 7 years, and we couldn't have found a better all-around team player." So should be cool to see Jay Shellen in the fold and working with Yes moving forward on their live dates. Sounds like they're working on a new album as well that should possibly come out even by the end of this year, follow-up to The Quest, so should be interesting to check out. I know there's a lot of mixed opinions on The Quest and on the newest iteration of Yes and stuff, but always exciting to see these classic prog musicians doing stuff and being active in the community, and I just support anything that comes out in that regard. Item number 5, I mentioned this in my brief little stint last week in my short, but Leprous frontman Einar Solberg announced a debut solo album to come out called 16. This is coming out June 2nd on Inside Out, of course. Einar Solberg is one of my favorite vocalists of the modern prog scene. He just has such a beautiful register that can really go in very beautiful places. He really has this high, very beautiful voice that goes into these higher octaves. It's a really pleasant sound. He's a Norwegian artist who plays with Leprous, and this should be interesting to hear his debut album and how he sounds without the band. So that should be really cool to check out. There's a single already out called Grotto. It sounds like there's a lot of guest musicians and guest singers and stuff along for the ride here, so that should be really cool. And so it should be a fun album to explore and to see the musical world that Einar is bringing to the table here. A lot of people have been accusing Leprous of moving towards being a little bit of a solo act for Einar anyways, because they're moving away from their more band-focused, heavier sound into a more singer-focused set of songs. So this should be more in the direction, I would imagine, of some of the more recent Leprous albums, but it sounds like it could be a really diverse, interesting, cool listen, so definitely something I'll be checking out as well. So now we get into the Prog singles list. It's a really expanded list this week because it basically covers this week and last. I wanted to make sure to make up for the singles that would have been on the list last week. But yeah, a lot of prog stuff coming out that I think is worth checking out. First on the list, I have Haken's newest single, Love Bite, which they released on Valentine's Day, a little bit of a funny Valentine's Day treat, because really the song's about some ending of a relationship and some toxic nature of relationships, and comparing it to a black widow that eats their prey and all this stuff. So it's not really the heartwarming Valentine's Day song lyrically that you might expect, but it's a great song from Haken's upcoming record, which I plan to cover on the channel very, very soon. And it has a very 80s inspiration to it and just sounds really great. A really cool new single from the band. Arjen Lucassen's Supersonic Revolutions track, The Glam Attack that I mentioned in the headline items, is also on my list. Exploring Birdsong and their track Bear the Weight is on my list. Really cool band, more of maybe an indie prog sort of sound with some great piano and female vocals. This is a beautiful track that I would recommend. They have an EP coming out March 24th that I'm really excited for, called Dancing in the Face of Danger. So that's one to check out. ACT came out recently with a new single called The Girl Without a Past. I love ACT. They're more in this power pop, but with prog and metal influences also. They just have a lot of fun with their music, and it's cool to see them with some new music. They have a new EP coming out called Falling on March 3rd, so I'm excited about that one. We'll cover it on the channel. Nine Skies, a French progressive band, came out with The Explorer featuring Ricardo Romano. This is their first single from their forthcoming album, The Lightmaker, which is coming in 2023, later this year. So Clone has a new single called Apnea, which is from their album that just barely came out called Meanwhile. Came out last week, so check that one out to get a feel. French prog once again, but more of the heavier variety, a bit more atmospheric metal type style. Einar Solberg's solo track Grotto featuring Magnus Bormark is on the list as well, as I mentioned, his solo release. Humphreys McGee has a new track out called The Staircase that was really cool. A new single from the Jam Band, who I really enjoy. They have a little bit of progressive leanings that I really find fun. Kite Parade has a new track called Retro. Kite Parade is a UK melodic prog band, similar to bands like It Bites and John Mitchell's stuff with Lonely Robot. Think on that lane, maybe a more pop prog kind of style. Really incredible stuff. Last year they had an incredible album called The Way Home. Now this year they're coming out with Retro on March 28th on White Knight Records. So this is the title track from it, called Retro. I wanted to put your attention towards that because it's a really cool pop prog sort of track. E-Molecule came out with the title track from their record, The Architect, noting their release for their new album, which was released last week. I did a review on that one as well. Really cool album, and has that darker, heavier prog vibes that I have been enjoying. I think it's a cool track. Squid, more of a post-punk band that leans a little bit in the prog space, similar to bands like Black Country New Road and Black Midi. They have a new single out called Swing in a Dream from their forthcoming album Oh Monolith, which is coming out June 9th on Warp Records. So that's one definitely check out. I really like that single. And Transatlantic have a live single out for We All Need Some Light, coming from the live album that came out this week, as I've mentioned. So really a cool set of songs, a bunch of variety there. There's going to be something to like for any prog fan in that list. So recommend you look at the description and click on some of the links for some of those great prog songs that are coming out, and go to my Spotify playlist if you happen to be a Spotify user to check out the playlist I've created that has these songs, at least the ones that are available on Spotify, as well as songs from the past few weeks on these prog singles lists. So really wanted to showcase that. And so for the channel itself, this past week, like I said, was a bit of a Transatlantic week. I did a Transatlantic album review for their new live album, and then I did a full-on ranking show, so please check those out if you haven't yet. I did, of course, a typical prog song Sunday with Jana. We covered Steven Wilson's very haunting melancholy track Routine from Hand Cannot Erase. Really had a very interesting discussion about that. I felt like Jana had some really insightful commentary about the meaning of the lyrics and about the song in general, so I'd recommend checking that out. As for this week, we have a little bit of a lesser known prog gem for our prog Song Sunday listen, which should be interesting. A track I actually wasn't that familiar with going in, so a bit of a double reaction for once on that show. So I'll let that tease stand and see how you guys feel about the track this week. Then I'm going to do a Haken review. Haken's the big new prog album coming out on March 3rd, and I want to get a jump on the review. I've been listening to it, listening to my promo copy, and it's just been such a fun experience. So I'm planning to talk about that album this week, and I'm really excited to. And I'm also going to do a review of a bit more of an obscure album, but should be appealing to fans of Neil Morse band like me. That's We Came From Space and their new album Overlords. So that will be a review this week as well. And so that's doing a double review week, so that should be fun. And then hopefully another new music weekly next week. to talk about the latest prog headlines once again. So thank you guys so much for joining me on this journey and joining me on these shows. Hope you appreciate the content here. Let me know in the comments and let me know of any news I may have missed from this past week or anything you're ultimately excited about that's coming out. So thank you guys so much for your support, and I will hopefully catch you in another video. Bye everyone!